Welcome back, gentle listeners, for another episode of Faith and Reason. This is Dr. Gavin Kerr here, and who am I with?
Niamh Palmer. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, it's great to be back, isn't it?
It's always good to be back. The sun is shining
exactly.
again.
It's a great day, yeah. We're here to talk a wee bit more about faith and reason. What are we going to talk about today, Niamh?
Abortion and euthanasia.
Abortion and euthanasia.
Big topics.
Yeah. It's not going to be too bad, is it?
No, lighten up.
Before we get into that, will we make a few announcements?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody who wants to get in contact, if you would like to post a letter to us, if you want to write to us, it's Radio Maria Ireland, St Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. That's Radio Maria Ireland, St Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. You can call us on 01412 3456. That's 01412 3456. And if you're outside of Ireland, it's plus 353 1412 3456. That's plus 353 1412 3456. If you want to text or send in a WhatsApp into the show, and we'll get it, we'll read it live on air, and we'll answer your questions.
We love the questions.
We do love the questions, yeah. It's 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if you're outside of Ireland, it's plus 353 89 467 2000. That's plus 353 89 467 2000. And you can always email us at info@radiomaria.ie. That's info@radiomaria.ie. So we want some difficult questions today, don't we, Niamh?
This is a difficult topic, so...
Yeah, we need difficult questions. Yeah. So, gentle listeners, send in your difficult questions. And we should just remind the gentle listeners about our Catholic therapy show that we're going to do. Yeah, we're going to do a Catholic therapy show every month, and this month it's going to be the final Thursday of the month, which is the 31st. Isn't it? Yeah. And so just send in any question, any issue that you have about Catholicism, about Catholic theology, the Catholic faith, anything, and we will address it.
Or something maybe your friends have approached you with, a difficulty your friends have and you just couldn't answer it. Maybe now's the time. Yeah,
and we'll get on top of that. Another announcement to make is this day next week is a big day for Irish people, isn't it? What is it?
Of course, St Patrick's Day.
St Patrick's Day. So, gentle listeners, we will not be live in person on St Patrick's Day. We will be at home with our families and all the rest. But we have pre-recorded an episode for you. What did we pre-record it on?
I'm blanking. Oh my goodness.
We recorded it on the Eucharist.
Oh, of course, yes, on transubstantiation.
Transubstantiation. That's right. So we were here just earlier in the week recording on transubstantiation. Gentle listeners, anybody who would like to know what the real presence means, how the bread and the wine can convert to the body and blood of Christ, what that means for the accidents in the bread and the wine, the accidents of Christ's body and blood. So Christ's beard, his eye colour, how that all can be present in the Eucharist. We did an entire show on that. So if you want to hear about that on St Patrick's Day, tune in. If you find that you're a little bit busy on St Patrick's Day or you're doing something else, you can always catch up on the Spotify, on the YouTube, on the various social media platforms. So that's what we're doing, isn't it?
We're always up to something.
We are. So, pro-life issues, issues today, abortion and euthanasia. I have a whole set of notes here I want to talk about, but Niamh, why don't we just forget about that and you can start us off and we'll get into it. Let's begin with abortion first of all. So how do you want to start on abortion?
Well, I think it's important, when we were talking about the topic quickly in the car, maybe we talk a lot about euthanasia now because that's something that our country is facing and it's very much prevalent in Europe. But I think it's very much important to say that abortion isn't an issue of the past just because the referendum has already come and been and everything. The fight for life and abortion continues, and it's still important today as it was when 2018
to 2018.
I can't even remember. It's still important now as it was then, if not more important, because our maybe we've forgot to talk about it now. It's forgotten.
And as philosophers, Niamh, I mean, the issue, that speaks to the wider social, cultural issues of, attitudes and towards abortion and reception of abortion. But as philosophers, it's always going to be a perennial issue in philosophy, whatever stance you take on abortion, because it speaks to the issue of whether or not certain beings, certain animals, are subject to a right to life. And if they are subject to a right to life, how do we honour that right to life and balance that out with the rights of others in relation to it? Which are perennial philosophical issues, aren't they?
Yeah, this is only something I came across recently in a modern kind of philosophy class that I was taking last semester. Because I never thought of it I never thought of abortion in a philosophical way or, you know, in that way. And if we were studying what is a person, what is being, when does a being become a person? And obviously from the Catholic stance, a being is always a person. And
well, a certain kind of being is always a person.
A human being is always a person. And by kind of bringing that up, the lecture kind of, you know, it naturally comes up about abortion and things. And, you know, because if a fetus is a person, then you can't kill it. But is it a person? Is it not a person? And
well, we're going to get into the weeds of that, aren't we? Well, here, we've talked about the dignity of the person before on previous shows. So the issue of what a person is, we will get to that. But maybe we should start with why we take it that persons have dignity and thus a right to life. Should we maybe begin with that? Do you remember we talked a few weeks about Kant and his reasoning for why a person has dignity? Do you remember it, or would you like me to go over it?
You should go over it.
Gentle listeners, Kant is one of my favourite philosophers, next to Aquinas. Aquinas and Kant are my two favourite philosophers, sort of, you know, Anno Domini favourite philosophers, whereas Plato and Aristotle are my two, you know, favourite pre-Christian philosophers. But Kant, he has this notion that in whatever way you engage with a person, and what he means as a human being there, you always need to treat a person as an end and never as a means to an end. So you never use a person as an instrument for your own ends. You always just treat a person as an end in itself. Isn't that right, Niamh?
Yep.
That's known as the categorical imperative. Don't worry about that, but that's Kant's categorical. Well, it's the second formulation of his categorical imperative. What Kant means there is that when you treat something as an end, you value it. Okay, so if you have money, you purchase something with the money, right? You value what you purchase more than the money that you possess. Okay, so shop owner has something, you want to purchase it, you value that more than the money that you have in your pocket, whereas the shop owner values your money more than his or her possessions in the shop, and that's kind of how exchanges occur. And persons are things that are to be valued in themselves, says Kant. They're not like money that you use to get something else. They're not like food that you consume for some sort of purpose. There's no further purpose to which a person can be put than simply to be valued as a person. Why does Kant think that? Do you remember why Kant thinks that, Niamh? I love the wide eyes whenever I ask you.
I know.
These questions.
I really hope my lecturers don't listen in, because not only did we record shows on it, I also took many lectures. But no, go ahead.
Niamh never took a class with me on Kant, didn't you, not, Niamh?
No, see, that's why I can't remember.
Right. The thing is, the reason why we treat persons as ends in themselves, as centres of value in themselves, is because if you, a person is a thing which is rational, okay? It's a rational kind of thing, okay? It's able to understand the world around it and engage with the world around it and make up its own choices. So a person is such that they're able to decide and determine their own ends. That's what persons are. That's what's constitutive of being a person, that you are able to do that. It doesn't mean that you do it, but it means that you're a kind of thing which is able to do that. Well, if that is the case, to use a person for your own ends is to override their personhood. It's to cease to treat them as a person, okay, with their own ends and desires and wills and so forth, but to treat them as an instrument for your own use, as subject to your ends. So it doesn't recognise the intrinsic nature of the person as a being capable of engaging in the world and making choices from time to time. Rather, it subjects that person to your own willings, your own ends, your own purposes. And so it's not to treat the person as a person. And Kant had this insight, and others had it. I mean, Aquinas had it, Plato, Aristotle had it, John Paul II had it in, Love and Responsibility. Actually, John Paul II, he's working off a thoroughly Kantian outlook in Love and Responsibility and Theology of the Body. The point is that because persons are such things that they're able to determine their ends for themselves, they can never be used for anybody else's ends. Okay, they just have to be valued for the things that they are. And that's why we treat persons as ends, as things of value. Happy enough, Niamh?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
That's what we mean by the dignity of the person. That's what the dignity of the person is. That no matter what state they are in, no matter how awful a person looks, no matter how bedraggled they are, unhealthy they are, whatever, okay, they are to be treated as valued ends in themselves because of what they are, not because of what they can do and not because of what state they're in. That notion of the dignity of the person, that's what's at the heart of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, subsequently ratified by a number of countries in the European Convention. It was Thomist philosophers who wrote it, and that was their understanding of dignity, that people are born with this dignity, and that grounds the right to life because they are ends in themselves and they're valuable in themselves. Their life is to be valued and not taken away from them. So they have a right to life. That's what grounds it, and that's what the dignity of person is. It's not being really smart. It's not being very well dressed. Okay, so I have just as much dignity, with my tattoos and my ripped jeans and my DMs as somebody in a three-piece suit. So because we're both persons, we're both equally dignified and in possession of dignity, and so to be valued as the ends that we are. So that's the dignity of the person, and that's what grounds the right to life. So now we ask, what sort of things do we include under the category of person? So, am I a person, Niamh?
Yeah.
Are you a person?
Yes.
Is a fetus a person?
Yes.
You're saying yes. Why do you think a fetus is a person?
Well, I mean, for a long time I would have said it because that's what I was taught, and that's what the Catholic faith believes. But more and more, obviously, as I get into philosophy, I have to think deeper about these things and find more fulfilling answers. And honestly, it's still something I kind of struggle to come to terms with or kind of put into words. But the fetus, if left to grow, in the mother's womb, it would obviously grow into a person that can survive on their own. And
the fetus becomes a person as it grows,
I know that was I knew you'd get me. The potential.
It's potentially a person, is it?
No, it is a person, but.
Well, here, how about we go back to the definition of a person? It's something that is rational.
Yeah, and if it's rational, it has a rational soul.
Well, maybe we'll not complicate things with this idea of a soul.
Okay.
So let's leave the soul out of it. But let's say, a person is something that is rational. It's the kind of thing which is rational. Now, what is it to be rational? What is it for us to be rational? I mean, it's not to occupy some sort of private mental space. It's not to have a mind or anything like that. For us to be rational is simply to be in the world and react to the world, to the environment, as human beings. It goes right down into our very bones. Everything that we do rationally. Everything. Even when we're not thinking about it, we're doing it rationally. If you were playing a speed game of chess, if I'm driving a car and somebody stops me and asks me what I'm doing, I can say, I'm driving a car. I can say why I'm driving a car, why you're playing a game of speed chess. This goes right down into our very nature, to how we are formed. As human beings, we cannot but do anything qua rational. And then that can get very sophisticated, and we can do all the philosophy and the science and all those great mentally sort of things that human beings do. But even people who don't have great minds are nevertheless as rational as the greatest mind that has ever existed. Okay? So your person in the street is just as rational as your Albert Einstein. So rationality doesn't have anything to do with thinking. It may systematise thought. Our reason can systematise our thoughts, but it has nothing to do with thinking and everything to do with how we're put together. I'm sure there's been many times in your life that you haven't had use of your reason. But you're still rational. But you haven't had use of your reason. Yeah. I'm sure there was a time in your life when you weren't able to use your legs.
Yeah.
But you still were legged.
Yeah.
So you can still be two-legged without having use of your legs. You can still be sighted without having use of your sight because you got your eyes closed. You can still be rational without having use of your reason because you're asleep. Or preferably not drunk or whatever. But all of that goes to show that rationality is not to be identified with reasoning. Reasoning is something that you do in your intellect. but rationality is a feature of the kind of thing that you are.
Mm-hmm.
If a person is a rational kind of thing, and human beings are those kinds of things, I mean, the fetus is human.
Yeah.
And always will continue to be human until it dies. If human beings are the things which are rational, and the fetus is human and will continue to be human, then the fetus is rational. It may not have use of its reason, but it is a rational substance. It's a rational kind of thing, which a person is. So a fetus is just as much fully a person as I am, as you are. It may not have developed a personality, and it may be born and may grow up to develop one kind of personality, and then certain life events take over. It might have a completely different personality. We all know that. But it's still the same person entirely the way through. And I think that's really important to note here, that notion of person, that it doesn't consist in the use of your reason. It consists in being the kind of thing that you are. Well, if that's the case, then, put two and two together with what we've been saying, what Kant says about how we should treat persons as ends in themselves and not as means. How you feeling?
Yeah, I'm learning.
Okay. Well, good. It's good to learn. We're coming up at the end of our first segment. There was a lot to take in there, gentle listeners, and I hope we've been gentle in getting it across. Gentle listeners, go boil your kettle, get yourselves a coffee, and
or a tea.
Or a tea, if it's Lent, or a water, if we really are extreme. Go off, get yourself something, and listen to this bit of music, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back, gentle listeners. How are we feeling? Niamh?
I'm good. I'm digesting.
Because it's just after lunchtime, or?
No, philosophically.
Okay.
Maybe perhaps physically also.
Okay,
but
good. Gentle listeners, this is the first time Niamh and I have actually discussed this.
It is actually.
Yeah, this is the first time we've actually sat
all
and
those
discussed
car
this.
journeys and radio shows.
So, let's pick up with where we left off. To be a person is to be something that is rational. Okay? So it's to be a rational kind of thing. The kind of thing it's not rational. It's not to reason. Otherwise, drunk people wouldn't be persons. Sleeping people wouldn't be persons, and all the rest. If we accept that to be a person is to be rational, but doesn't mean to have the use of reason. You're two-legged, but you might not have the use of your legs. You're sighted, but you might not have the use of your sight because you got your eyes closed. Well, you can be rational and not have use of your reason, which is the case for a fetus, because if the fetus is put together in a certain way, it's the kind of thing that is rational. To be rational doesn't mean to have, you raised the word soul, and this is the biggest misconception. That to be rational doesn't mean to have this thing in you. in which reasoning occurs. To be rational means to be formed in a certain way, and we are going to do an episode on the soul. We are.
It's an ongoing
argument.
Concern.
It's an ongoing concern and a source of much misinformation and misunderstanding. Anyway, to be rational is to be formed in a certain way, and the fetus is formed in a certain way, a human way.
Formed by what?
Well, formed by, sort of the usual sort of processes by which it occurs. Now, we said we weren't going to get into the soul.
Okay,
so
sorry.
There is going to be a future episode on the soul. The soul does have something to do with formation, but the soul is not a mind. The soul is not this immaterial thing existing in you. Exactly. So it's just to emphasise that point, gentle listeners, that when we're talking about a person as a rational thing, we're talking about it as a thing which is formed in a distinctively kind of way, a human way. And that's how the fetus is formed. And the fetus is human and remains human and doesn't, at a certain point, at 26 weeks, cease to be the kind of substance that it is and transforms into a new substance. Or the child, when reaching the age of reason, that we say, reaching the use of its reason, but we say reaching the age of reason, doesn't transform into a new substance like a butterfly at 6 or 7 years old. It remains the same self-developing substance from the moment of conception till its death. So if it's the same kind of thing, it has the same identity, and so it's the same person throughout. Now, we talked about Kant, didn't we? The persons are ends, they're to be valued in themselves, okay? And that's what grounds the right to life. That if one uses a person for one's own ends and doesn't value the person as the end is in itself, then one is not treating the person as a person. One is treating it as something which isn't a person. Well, if that's the case for you and me, that's the case for a fetus as well. Yeah.
But I think a question that would come up against that is, that's the definition of person that we're using. But if that's not the definition of person you're using, then the fetus perhaps isn't a person then and has no right to life.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to, sort of see what. So give me some other definitions of persons and let's interrogate that.
Well, I suppose the biggest one, I mean, it's totally contrary to what you just said, but like when the person reaches reason or is able to make reasonable choices.
Exactly. Yeah. And gentle listeners, if you're interested in a philosopher who thinks like that, well, John Locke is one of them. But in his big book, just remembering the title, let me just download it. Essay Concerning Human Understanding. In the Essay Concerning Human Understanding, John Locke defines a person as something which is self-conscious, which is close to what you're suggesting. It's something which is minded, which can make reasons and choices. And Peter Singer, in Practical Ethics, he makes the same. He gives the same account of the person as well. Something which is minded, which can make choices. Here's the thing, Neve. Here's the thing. Let's run with that definition of person, okay? What that requires us to say is that to be a person is something different than to be a human being.
Exactly, yeah.
So it divides off being a person from being a human being, right? Now, if, let's say, you have the fetus develop, born, and let's go with Peter Singer. So Peter Singer doesn't think that, a human becomes a person until it reaches the age of reason of 6 or 7, okay? So let's say, you've got the child, you've got the baby, right? And it's a human being, but it's not a person. Then at about the age of 6 or 7, whenever reason comes in, it becomes a person. Yeah. That means, because it becomes something new, it ceases to be a human, and it's now a person. Yeah. Like the caterpillar ceases to be a caterpillar, and becomes a butterfly. That's the kind of view which that endorses. Now, is it the case that the baby ceases to be human when it reaches the use of reason, or is it just able to use powers and faculties that it already had, and it took some time to grow to maturity to make use of them? Yeah,
I mean, it's just like saying, so a small baby obviously can't talk, or even a toddler can't talk correctly, but it's not that they can't talk, they just haven't reached, their brain hasn't reached the age of, to be able to talk,
to make use of that ability.
But it's not that they don't have the ability there.
Exactly. So that view that to be a person is to be minded, to be able to make up one's mind, wills and choices and stuff, actually requires a commitment to the view that at some point in the development of the life of that human being, it ceases to be human. It ceases to be a human being and is transformed like a butterfly from a caterpillar into something else, which is the person. But in reality, what's actually happening there is that it remains human all the way through, and it now just, is able to start using some of its capabilities that it already had, but just, didn't have the use of. In the same way that we use our legs. We're not born able to use our legs. And we just need to grow strong. And then we start to be able to use our legs. And you use the example of speech as well. The human being always has the ability for speech. And immediately, as soon as children start developing, they start, noticing these patterns. There's rationality at work right there. And forming speech. That's immediately what our children are doing in the world. So they're not transforming into something new. They're just putting into actuality capabilities that they already have. Well, now let's think about the fetus. The fetus is a human substance, right? So it's a human being. And the idea here is that, well, it's not until the fetus, develops kind of some mindedness or power of mindedness or willing or whatever until it becomes a person. Well, again, that asks us to accept that at that point where it develops these abilities, it ceases to be a human and is now something other than a human, caterpillar to butterfly. But that's not how human development and growth works.
That also means they have the capacity to lose that personhood as well.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what we're going to get to when we start talking about euthanasia. So, gentle listeners, I know that brought us off target a wee bit there, because I do want to talk about a female philosopher who's defended abortion, and it's a really important one to be aware of. But I think that was important that we did get into that, because it's a very prevalent idea that, because most of the people we engage with are minded and have minds and stuff, because most of the people that we do engage with are like that, then we tend to think that, well, that's what persons are. And so that anything which isn't like that isn't a person. But when we actually, subject that to philosophical scrutiny, that doesn't tend to be the case. Niamh, can I talk about a female philosopher?
Please.
Judith Jarvis Thomson. Have you heard of her?
From yourself before, but before that, no.
Judith Jarvis Thomson, she wrote a paper called A Defence of Abortion. Now, Judith Jarvis Thomson has written a lot in philosophy. She passed away last year, I think, about a year ago. I remember seeing the obituary. One area of philosophy she's really interested in is something that I really enjoy, is action theory, how we act and how we engage as subjects, as agents in the world. And another philosophical hero of mine, Elizabeth Anscombe, she was a Catholic philosopher at Oxford, student of Wittgenstein. She also wrote on action theory. She revolutionised action theory in the 20th century. But Judith Jarvis Thomson, she has this paper in defence of abortion. And what she says is, okay, let's grant the right to life of the fetus. Let's grant the right to life. We can still make a good argument for abortion, she says, if we grant the right to life. Even if the fetus has a right to life, we can still make a good argument for an abortion, for the moral permissibility of abortion. Are you aware of this, Niamh?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you heard of the violin player?
Yes.
She sets up this thought experiment of the violin player.
Yeah.
The violin player is undoubtedly a person. So we have a violin player, world famous violin player. Everybody loves this violin player. And that violin player, is undoubtedly a person with a right to life. Keep that in your mind. Gentle listeners, keep that in your mind. We have this violin player who undoubtedly has a right to life, is undoubtedly a person. Judith Jarvis Thomson says, okay, so you're not the violin player. You are walking past the hospital, and the violin player's friends, they they knock you out, in whatever way they do, and you wake up to find yourself in the hospital, connected up to this violin player, who needs to be connected to you to stay alive. Okay, so the violin player has been connected up to you to stay alive. Okay, now the violin player undoubtedly has a right to life. Okay, nobody's denying that the violin player has a right to life. But Judith Jarvis Thomson makes the point that whilst the violin player has a right to life, you do not have a moral duty to keep the violin player alive. So what Judith Jarvis Thomson argues is that there's a distinction between ending the life of something which has a right to life and ending a pregnancy. Whilst, she says, grant that the fetus has a right to life, that doesn't mean that the mother has a responsibility to remain pregnant. And the mother has a right, Thomson argues, to end a pregnancy, even if that means ending the life of something which has a right to life. What do you think of that, Niamh? Are you convinced?
No. I think she's just...
well, now, let's not dismiss her. I mean, she's
no, I'm not
she's an
dismissing her.
excellent
I'm not, of
philosopher.
course, and I'm obviously a very young philosopher. But I think it's just using words in a different way. I mean, yeah, I think she's just playing around with words to kind of prove a point or something.
Well, isn't that what all we philosophers do?
Yeah. Yeah.
She makes a really important distinction here between ending the life of the child and ending a pregnancy. And it's one that we're going to have to...
it's like ending the life is kind of...
it's a consequence.
A consequence of ending the pregnancy, but they don't equal each other.
Yeah. And she's basically saying, you know, what we're doing here is we're not ending the life. That's a consequence of what we're doing. What we're doing is ending the pregnancy.
Yeah.
Now, do you want to hear maybe a thought or two about that?
Please.
Well, think about this, gentle listeners. There are all sorts of things that we do which have foreseeable consequences, but we're not striving to attain those consequences. So in an example I've used before in discussing the principle of double effect, if I go into the kitchen and I see my child is about to pull, you know, the pot of scalding water on him, I will bound across that kitchen and push him out of the way. Now that may have the consequence that he falls and against the wall and hurts himself, and I'll have to fix it with ice cream. But what was I trying to do there? I was trying to get him out of the way of the scalding water. I was not trying to knock him down. I was trying to get him away of the scalding water, not knock him down. Now, knocking him down was a foreseeable consequence. There could have been other consequences as well. But the act of getting him out of the way of the scalding water is not uniquely tied to the consequence of him falling down. It would have equally been successful had he not fallen down. Now, bear that in mind. The act is not uniquely tied to that consequence. Now, let's consider... Now, Thompson's trying to make that same distinction, that because the act is not uniquely tied to the consequence, such as getting the child out of the way of the scalding water and the child falling or not falling or, you know, tripping or whatever, Thompson's trying to make the same distinction that the act of ending a pregnancy is not uniquely tied to the death of one subject to a right to life. So she's making the point that what we're striving to do is end a pregnancy. We're not striving to end the life of something subject to a right to life. But here's the thing. The act of ending a pregnancy is uniquely tied to the act of ending the life of the child, because you cannot end the pregnancy without some seriously, you know, sort of developed, you know, medical technology that we do not have. You cannot end a pregnancy without ending the life of the child. Well, you can. I mean, you can bring the child to term, and then the pregnancy, when the child's born, the pregnancy will be ended. But you cannot induce the end of a pregnancy without ending the life of the child. So ending a pregnancy is uniquely connected with ending the life of the child. And so one can't engage in that action and say that it's only an act of ending a pregnancy, it's not the act of ending the life of the child. And engaging in that action, the means to engage in that action is to end the life of the child. The ending of the life of the child is not a consequence of the action, it's the means which is used for the action. And since the child has a moral right to life, it's being used as a means for some sort of end, which means it should not be used. It would be like somebody, you know, who's a smoker, right? And, you know, I mean, lots of people are smokers and stuff, but we know about the dangers of secondhand smoke. And so you smoke around children, you know, we've got laws, you know, about, you know, smoking in public places and stuff. The dangers of secondhand smoke is that you ought not to do that, because smoking is uniquely connected with, you know, the dangers of secondhand smoke. And so we advise, you know, this is something you ought not to do, you know, around, say children or whatever. Well, it's the same sort of thing here, because the ending of the life of the child is uniquely connected to the act of ending the pregnancy. It's the means by which the pregnancy is ended. So you're ending the life of something which has a moral right to life as a means to end a pregnancy. And that's kind of, you know, one of the approaches, one of the responses which is offered against Judith Jarvis Thompson's Val Impler analogy. And gentle listeners, if anybody is interested in any reading about that, Patrick Lee, the philosopher Patrick Lee, I believe he's in Steubenville, Franciscan University in Steubenville. He will be, he'll be beaming into us in St Patrick's for our conference at the end of April on the future of Christian thinking. But he's written some great papers on abortion and the right to life, and in particular Judith Jarvis Thompson's issue. Yeah. So there you go. Judith Jarvis Thompson, how do you feel, Niamh?
I mean, I think the way she takes the theory of the violin player and puts it on the abortion one, it's a fair thing to do, because why is it different, but of course it's different because of what you were saying earlier about what Kant was saying, and about the person not being a means to something, and, because obviously you could just come back again and say, oh, it is different because we didn't mean to kill the fetus, we were just ending the pregnancy. And obviously, you're saying we can't separate the two of them, but I do think it was fair that she used that analogy in proving her point.
It was ingenious.
Yeah. But of course it doesn't work the same way because of what you were saying earlier about Kant and the person not being a means.
Okay, very good. Should we give the gentle listeners a break?
Yeah, I need a break too.
Okay. So. Gentle listeners, just if you have any questions, if you want to text in, the text and the WhatsApp is 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if it's from outside of Ireland, it's plus 353 89 467 2000. That's plus 353 89 467 2000. Or you could email in info@radiomaria.ie. Gentle listeners, go have a little break, relax,
some fresh air,
unwind,
some sunshine,
listen to the music for a couple of minutes, and we'll be back right after this.
Worship Hi, this is Dominic McGorian. Please join me for Music to Your Heart on Wednesday afternoons from 4 to 5 p.m. I'll be playing music from a variety of genres: classical, pop, Celtic and sacred. I'd love to hear from you, so if you send in your requests, I'll play your favourites for you and we'll put together a fabulous show, only here on Radio Maria Ireland.
Welcome back, gentle listeners. I hope you've debriefed, decompressed.
Just take a quick breath.
Yeah, take a quick breath. You know, it's intense today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The conversation in the car on the way back is going to be intense. So, we're going to change tact, gentle listeners. We were talking about, issues at the beginning of life.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to talk about issues at the end of life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to talk about euthanasia, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it'd be best if we go back to this issue of dignity.
Yeah.
So, dignity. To have dignity, Immanuel Kant, is to be treated as an end in oneself. It's to be a subject of value in virtue of what one is.
Yeah.
Because one is a person, one is a subject of value. Persons are the most valuable things in existence. If persons have to be treated as ends and never as a means, they can never be used for anything else. They can only be valued. It's the most valuable thing that can exist as a person. We okay so far, Neve?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, what does that mean then? It means that dignity cannot be used to undermine the value of a person. Dignity is not something that you can use to undermine a person's value.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say a person is no longer valuable and no longer can be treated as an end in themselves because you think that they don't have dignity or they're not dignified. How does that sound?
Yeah.
You following that?
Yeah, for the abortion question, that makes sense.
So, if we get to the euthanasia question then, how do we value ends? What do we do when we value ends? Do we use them to bring about some other sort of goal, or do we just simply value them as the goods that they are in themselves?
The good that they are in themselves.
Yeah, we don't use them as instruments for any further goal. But euthanasia, because it's the intentional, ending of a life, of a person, which is to be valued, doesn't value the life of the person as an end in itself, but as a means of the goal that it, is being sought to bring about, which is the person's death.
Yeah.
So the person's life, which is valuable and valued because of dignity, that's what dignity is now being used as a means to attain some other end, which is the death of the person.
Yeah. But you said earlier, we can't lose our dignity in our choices. So if a person chooses to undertake like euthanasia themselves, they haven't been pressured or anything, like they've done this by themselves, their dignity can't be taken from them.
Yeah, they can't take their dignity from them.
Yeah.
And what they're doing then is they are not valuing their lives, their life as an end in itself. They're treating it as a means to a different end.
But we often do this in other ways, we don't eat the healthy dinner, or we don't,
Yeah, and we ought to eat the healthy dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we ought not to drink, 16 cups of coffee a day. Yeah, that's the point. I mean, throughout the moral life, that's one of the biggest issues, and this is something that we talked about with authenticity, that we don't realise our value as the ends we are in themselves. We frequently treat ourselves as a means to some sort of further end.
Yeah.
And euthanasia is the prime example of that. The not valuing the life of the entity which has dignity. So the main point there is that an appeal to dignity, it can't justify the ending of a human life. All the appeal to dignity can do can affirm the goodness of human life.
Yeah.
How does that sound? There's a lot of yeses coming from you here.
No, I understand that obviously, but I just don't see how philosophically we can still it's still the person who sees now that the best thing for their life, which they've valued, is to end it. Yeah.
So they see that as the best thing in the same way that you see that eating the unhealthy dinner is the best thing. So because you see eating the unhealthy dinner to be the best thing, it's not the best thing. Okay? And it's not the best thing because we can do all the, the objective sort of stuff. This is what's nutritious, this isn't what's nutritious. Well, in the same way, I mean, somebody, who thinks this is the best thing, obviously doesn't see, Kant's point and, the point about the nature of dignity, that things which have dignity are to be treated as ends in themselves. They don't see themselves as, being dignity, even though they have dignity and they are ends in themselves and not to be treated as ends in themselves. They don't see themselves like that. Obviously, they are, but the problem is they don't see themselves like that. Now, that's not an issue that philosophy can, fix.
No.
That's something that a lot of interpersonal, engagement and counselling and care and concern can fix. The philosopher can, sort of point out the moral truth of the situation. But the actual pastoral situation is only something that, somebody much more skilled than a philosopher can do. All we can do as philosophers is point out, the kind of the moral values which are at play here. Can we talk about ordinary and extraordinary care?
Yes.
Yes? Do you know what ordinary and extraordinary care is?
In the end of life, what's ordinary?
Well,
and then extraordinary measures are something that the human couldn't do by themselves.
Yeah. So there's a distinction in medical care between ordinary medical care and extraordinary medical care. So, ordinary medical care. Gentle listeners, so it may be no surprise to you that I'm a martial artist. Yeah. And this weekend, I'm going to be martially arting. And let's just say, I'm fighting and, I break a finger or something. Ordinary care is I go, I get that finger strapped up and, I'm healed.
Yeah.
So there's nothing extraordinary about that. Once this sort of the medics, give me their attention, I'll just spring back and I'll be back at Fight Club, or I'll be back martially arting, a few weeks later. Yeah. That's ordinary care. And that comes in degrees. Okay, so a broken finger, okay. But then, there's other ordinary care as well, whereby, the body is healed or put on its way to healing itself and then can go about the business of living life. And that can be, even seriously extreme medical procedures such as, surgeries, heart conditions, all of that. The body, that constitutes ordinary care because the body is put in such a state that it can come back to health. Extraordinary care is when the body has reached such a state that the medical intervention is not putting it in a position where it can return to health, but that the body is, it's ending, it's dying, and the extraordinary care is keeping, the individual alive. So that's the distinction between ordinary and extraordinary care. Now, it's up to medics, to determine, in the extraordinary care case, whether or not the individual is dying, and that's going to take time and attention and all the rest. Now, it is ethically permissible to end extraordinary care.
Yeah.
And here's why. Because this comes under the principle of double effect. We remember that principle of double effect. We can strive after an action, and it can have foreseeable consequences that we did not strive to bring about. So I run across the kitchen, push my child out of the way of the scalding water. The child falls and hurts, himself. I wasn't trying to cause the child to hurt himself. I was trying to get him out of the way of the boiling water. Yeah. If he didn't fall and hurt himself, would my action have been a failure? No, because he's out of the way of the scalding water. So because the action wouldn't have been a failure if he hadn't fallen and hurt himself, then I wasn't trying to make him fall and hurt himself. If that's what I was trying to do and he didn't fall, then it would have been a failure. Right. Here's why we can end extraordinary care. Let's say somebody's, in a situation and, their life is ending, and we remove extraordinary care. Let's say they make a miraculous recovery. Was our action a failure?
No.
Were we striving to end their lives? No, we weren't striving to end their life. In removing extraordinary care, we're not striving to end the life of a patient, because if the patient made a miraculous recovery, we wouldn't be like, oh, darn. Yeah. We'd be like, oh, wow. So what we're striving to do with ending extraordinary care is, well, to make the patient comfortable, realising that it's the end of life and to prepare for the end of life. We don't remove nutrition and hydration. Yeah. We still give nutrition and hydration. So we're still affirming the life and the dignity of the person who's ordinary care has ended. And in doing that, that means that what we're striving after is not the death of the patient, but something else, which isn't the death of the patient. So the ending of ordinary care is not the same action as striving to end the life of a patient. They're two different actions.
But often in extraordinary care, to end extraordinary care, that would mean, in a very rare case, but it means the only way to do it is to withdraw nutrition
and
hydration.
Yeah. In some cases, because there's some illnesses which are so sick, the only way to do that is it means that we can't administer hydration and nutrition. But what happens there is that in no circumstances we're still going to try to strive to administer nutrition and hydration. Maybe not every day, but maybe every other day or whatever. And because the patient can't respond to this, or we can't do it because of the illness, it's not the case that we're striving to end nutrition and hydration. We still want to try to get it to the patient in whatever way we can. We're not just saying, right, no hydration and nutrition. What we're saying is, right, we're ending extraordinary care. We still need to try to get nutrition and hydration into this patient. What is the best way to do this? And usually that's a very kind of, gritty sort of, medical issue that medics have to try and face. But what they're not doing is holding up as an end, as a goal, the ending of nutrition and hydration. They're affirming something else, that we're ending extraordinary care. And given the situation that we find ourselves in, this, is how we're going to have to treat the patient. How does that sit with you, Niamh?
Yeah, no, that's, conscious of the time, but of course, that makes sense. But like, I'm studying in bioethics at the moment. The rare case of someone who has like a locked-in syndrome, or so they're not attached to any other machine. The only way that they're being maintained is nutrition or hydration. So what you're saying makes sense to me in regards to, say, a cancer patient nearing the end of their life. It would actually be dangerous for you to administer nutrition daily. But in this other person's case, the only way to, I suppose, end their life is to withdraw nutrition. That can't be justified, obviously.
So nutrition and hydration, let's say in the case of locked-in syndrome, that's not extraordinary care. That's ordinary care.
Okay.
You're providing for the ordinary care. Nutrition and hydration are the ordinary means of existence. Bread and water. So by providing that, you're providing ordinary care for a patient who can't do it for himself or herself. That individual is still a person. Still a rational animal that just doesn't have the use of his or her reason, let's say. So still an end to be valued in himself or herself. And the ordinary care of that individual is to give them nutrition and hydration. That's not extraordinary care. The nutrition and hydration can constitute extraordinary care in cases where literally it can't be administered. Not in the cases where the circumstances are extraordinary.
There's not the same.
It's when they can't be administered. That's what extraordinary care is. So in the case of a patient who is locked in, just because the circumstances are extraordinary doesn't mean the care is extraordinary. I mean, giving food and hydration is just the ordinary care that we give to any human being. I mean, a patient who isn't locked in, say I've broke my finger and I'm in the hospital, and the nurses give me my lunch, and my coffee and everything. That's just part and parcel of the ordinary care that you'd be getting in the hospital. If you didn't get that, if you weren't fed and watered while you're in the hospital, you'd be like, there's something going on here, there's something wrong here. So so that's part of ordinary care. And so the treatment of the patient that you mentioned is part of the ordinary care of that patient. Happy enough with that? Okay. Gentle listeners, we're coming up in our time. I hope we plotted, a nice course through.
Planted a seed, at least.
A lot of these issues. Notice, gentle listeners, we didn't refer to the soul, except for Niamh bringing open that can of worms at the beginning. We didn't talk about that at all. We are going to do an episode on the soul, though. We didn't talk about that at all. We didn't appeal to any revealed truths. Nothing in religion. Nothing like that. We just, went through it with, I'll not say the cold hard reasoning, but just in the perfectly reasonable manner, of a philosopher. These issues can be addressed and dealt with in that way. And we hope at least that we've shown you that one can plot a course through these, so that if one, is pro-life and engages with these issues, they can be engaged with in a thoroughly reasonable manner. And then if one is from a religious background, if one is Catholic, that just, enriches the reasonable way that we're doing it. But you can engage with it in a reasonable way without drawing in any of that sort of, religious background or anything like that. So we hope that at least, we've shown you that, that can happen. And there's much more to be said on this, and there's any of the topics we discuss, but at least we hope we've shown you that we can do that.
Yeah.
So, well, we let the gentle listeners go.
Go and enjoy a walk or a run in the sunshine to debrief from that.
Please do tune in for the transubstantiation episode on St. Patrick's Day. I really enjoyed recording it. It was a great episode.
It was good.
Yeah, it was good fun. Send us your questions for the Catholic therapy at the end of the month, and we might have a surprise for you as well in a few weeks. So we'll leave it at that, gentle listeners. Enjoy your weekend, and God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.